Hey, Myles.
Yeah, Cam?
Have you ever heard of Legend of the Guardians, the Owls of Ga'Hoole?
I think you're mixing up the whole Avatar thing with Guardians of the Galaxy.
You'd think that, but you were wrong.
Okay.
Hello, people of the internet, and welcome back to Inconceivable Media. I'm Cam.
I'm Myles.
And this week, I introduced Myles to a sort of obscure animated film called Legend of the Guardians, the Owls of Ga'Hoole. Legend of the Guardians, we'll just stick with calling Legend of the Guardians for right now, is a 2010 animated film brought to us by Zack Snyder. Yes, Zack Snyder, where we follow Soren, who's voiced by Jim Sturgis, a young owlet, and several of his friends on a journey to learn if the titular guardians do exist, and if they can help them in their time of need. As always, first things first, did you enjoy this film, Myles?
Yes, I absolutely enjoyed this. I think it was an excellent movie, and I feel like more movies could really learn from this.
Really?
Yeah.
I feel like you can't just say that without giving us just a tiny little bit more.
Well, unfortunately, I can't because that would give away a little bit too much of the plot in that. And let's just say everything flows very nicely. Mm-hmm. It goes from A to B to C very well. And at the end of the day, I don't think I have a single complaint about this.
All right. Okay, perfect. Were you at all surprised to learn who directed this? I know you've seen 300 and I know you've seen Watchmen. I'm not sure if you did watch Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, or any of the other ones, but I know you saw those two. So with
I have seen Man of Steel as well as Batman v Superman. And,
okay.
Unfortunately. And I can say that it isn't too surprising that Zack Snyder did actually do this movie because of his use of slow motion. It's kind of his little thing. It's sort of like how Michael Bay sexualizes explosions. Every director kind of has their own thing that makes them and draws people into their movies. So again, Zack Snyder is his use of slow motion. Michael Bay is his sexualization of explosions. James Cameron is unbelievable world building.
Cool. Although I will say it's not that it's slow motion is the thing. Very specifically, when it comes to Snyder's style, the term that's used is speed ramping. Because it's the effect of it, it's not just the slowing down, but then it's also the ramping the speed back up to go back into real time sort of thing. Anyways, would you recommend this film to others?
I would recommend this to others, but there are people I wouldn't recommend this to because there are people who don't like watching movies about animals with human-like personalities, even though, ironically, animals and people do have very similar personalities. Mm-hmm. They kind of each have their thing of the shy one, the timid one, the outgoing one, the curious one. Mm-hmm. It's all there. It's just that the communication is different, if you ask me. I don't think I would say that this movie should be age restricted. But I
so in that way, you would recommend it to anyone, no matter what age they are.
Yes, as long as parents are watching too. Like I said, I really like this movie. I don't think I have any real issues with it. So
awesome. I feel that I feel that more people need to be saying that about this movie, in the sense that more people need to see this movie.
Yes. But for now, before we get into spoilers, I feel we should put on a little Owl City.
Yes, we will. And then we'll see you later to talk about some spoilers. And take this opportunity, if you haven't seen this, go and find a way to watch it.
Awake the stars, 'cause they're all around you. Wide eyes will always brighten the blue. Chase your dreams and remember me, sweet bravery, 'cause after all, those wings will take you up so high. So bid the forest for goodbye as you race the wind and
All right, everyone, and we're back. And now we're going to digging into everything for Legends of the Guardians. And speaking of, there are 31 books in the Owls of Ga'Hoole series. You know, it's kind of like Redwall in that way of just how big the universe is.
But I bet they don't have a podcast based on a D&D adventure through their timeline.
You know, I feel like maybe that's a project we can work on in the future.
If I'm able to actually sit down and read 31 books, perhaps.
I don't think they have the same problem of like mole speech like they do in the Redwall books. But anyways, this film is an adaptation of the first 3 novels, which kind of cover the first big arc of the series. I guess I should say The Guardians of Ga'Hoole is what the name of the series as written by Catherine Lasky. So, the first chapter of where we begin our story with the 2 brothers Soren and Clud. Soren is a dreamer that is infatuated with the tales of the Guardians of Ga'Hoole, and this is an enthusiasm that is not shared by Clud. After an incident during flying practice, the 2 are kidnapped and taken to a place called St. Agilius, Home for Orphaned Owls, where they join many other owlets who have also been taken to work or serve the Pure Ones.
Soren and Clud are marked to be part of the Pure Ones, as they are Titos. But Soren shows too much sympathy towards an elf owlet known as Sylphie. Well, and as punishment is sent to be a picker, while Clud trains to be a soldier. Soren and Sylphie's actions do not go unnoticed and begin training in secret with Grimble, another servant of the Pure Ones, that wants revenge, possibly to atone for all the horrible things he has done in their name and being, essentially.
Mm-hmm. And then, after a daring escape, Soren and Sylphie meet up with 2 older owls named Digger and Twilight, and then they continue their journey to find the Guardians of Ga'Hoole. After many hardships, they make it to the tree spoken of in the stories, and the group is welcomed with open arms to do basically the same things they were doing under the Pure Ones, except without all the cruelty that came along with serving the Pure Ones. When first arriving and explaining why they sought the Guardians, Soren explains that the leader of the Pure Ones, Metalbeak, is amassing an army with the intent to wipe out the Guardians and subjugate all owls everywhere. To make a long story short, they do battle, and Soren kills Metalbeak, and Clud is presumed dead, but his body was never recovered, leaving a nice cliffhanger for a sequel that, at the time of this recording, no sequel has been made.
Yes. You never know. It could happen.
Right. What do you think about me saying that, with that when they go and they are part of the community with the Guardians, about how I say they are effectively doing the same things that they were doing at the school for orphaned owls?
I mean, at the end of the day, a lot like society, everybody has to do their jobs to make society move forward, keep everybody alive, and keep everything happening. So, you're right, it's the same things. By all means, when you take a look at both capitalism and communism, they were both doing the same things. It's just that capitalism had the push forward of economics and wealth, whereas communism was more of you're helping your fellow man, you're making things easier and better for everybody else. Mm-hmm. So is it a good thing, is it a bad thing? It doesn't matter, because it's the same thing, and that is to continue on the race. Mm-hmm. So is it a bad thing that they're both doing the same thing? No, because at the end of the day, it's all about survival.
Right.
So
it is interesting that you say capitalism and communism, which, I mean, you're not wrong there, but the interesting thing here is that the Pure Ones very much are supposed to be the stand-ins for Nazis. Like, they are very much like fascism without saying that.
Ideologies and that, yeah.
Right, with the fact that the Tito owls are the ones that will reign supreme over all the other owls.
I think you meant to say the Aryan owls.
I mean, you know, considering that the queen is pure white.
Yes. At first, when I saw her, I thought she was a snow owl, but I guess that's she's an albino, maybe.
Yeah, and considering the fact that the king and queen of the Guardians are both snow owls. And I mean, you can tell the difference there with the, Anyways, although speaking of characters, I suppose maybe we should dig in a little bit more with who we have here. So, first we've got Soren, who is voiced by Jim Sturgis, who is a young, idealistic owl. He and his brother Clud are both Tytos, which I believe are basically just barn owls. What did you think? What are your thoughts on Soren?
Personally, I feel Soren is kind of bland for a protagonist. It feels kind of like the whole Bella syndrome from Twilight.
Really?
Where somebody can like put themselves into their shoes and be along for the journey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he doesn't really have a specific personality, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, sure, he's a dreamer, but I mean, who couldn't be a dreamer, right?
That's a very valid point. I was about to say his brother's not much of a dreamer, but that's not true. They have different dreams. They have different goals.
Yeah.
They have different ways of thinking what is appropriate for getting to their goals. So again, with saying that he's kind of bland, would you say that in the sense that he has to do all of the hero things and he just does them?
Not really. I don't know how I feel about that. Like I said, I think he does it because he has to. I mean, like he's done things that don't make him a hero. He did push his brother Clud to go flying when they got captured.
That's true. That's a good point.
So, and then like he does do things that a hero wouldn't do too. It happens. Like I said, I just feel like him as a character, he doesn't have any other personality.
And, that's fine. Sometimes you just need to have the one character be sort of an avatar for the reader.
Yeah.
Kind of blank slate so that you can imprint on them and kind of feel that you are the one that are doing these things.
That's exactly what I mean by the whole Bella syndrome.
Okay. This is I feel like this is the first time I've really spoken about Twilight in like a serious conversation in forever.
Well, it's such a bad movie that you gotta you really pick it apart, but like it has points about it. So
that's true.
Let's carry on
with
characters.
So next we have Clud, Soren's brother, who is voiced by Ryan Quanten. So Clud, very much every chance he's given to, I guess, do the right thing as far as his brother is concerned, he does the wrong thing and he joins the Pure Ones willingly. He stays with the Pure Ones. He does everything to be with the bad guys. You can't see me, but, I keep using scare quotes for certain things because this is a very black and white story, right? You have...
I guess so, yeah.
Well, you're the one who said that to me after we finished watching this.
Yeah, it's very black and white.
There's not really... There aren't really a whole lot of shades of gray over who are the good ones and who are the bad ones in this story. Okay, so what do you feel about Clud then?
I feel he's very much a Judas of the family. He's very susceptible to cult encouragement. I guess it's because he's kind of the stuck in the shadow of his brother.
Mm-hmm.
And he just doesn't want that anymore. And somebody comes along and says, hey, look, like, you're actually special. You're different. You can be better than all this. Of course, he's going to be the kind of guy that steps up and goes, oh, yes, I was right all along. My brother is actually just, my parents are probably doing this because he's worse or something,
It's interesting that you say Judas, and I know that that's because Judas is the betrayer, but I think you're actually thinking of a different disciple, because I believe it's Peter is the one who denies that he is the one who denies knowing Jesus 3 times.
Yeah, I guess you are right about that. Well, I would say that this guy's definitely a betrayer because he goes back to his family and takes the
That's
daughter,
true.
right?
That's true too.
So he's definitely a super betrayer. As in terms of like aligning as Judas. Yeah, I know which character you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
and I do agree with you on that. I mean, the whole mythos of lycanthropy,
Mm-hmm.
or lycanthrope, depending how you like to pronounce it,
Right.
is the fact that because Judas betrayed Jesus for silver, he gets turned into a werewolf, and that is his
And
weakness,
that's why.
is silver.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I do understand that.
That makes a lot of sense, but this is the first time hearing of that.
Well, welcome to the occult special. We got to get like a little cue button so when Myles talks about his occult stuff, he can hit the
I
cue
like
button
it.
and continue on.
Yeah, but I like it when I learn things like this, because I sit there and I go, wow, so that's why it's silver, huh?
Yes, it's because he was paid in silver. And, of course, his punishment will be the fact that silver hurts him.
So what do you think about him then in comparison to Soren? So Soren, you think is kind of bland. So then what do you think about Clud then from like the antagonist perspective?
Well, he does have a personality, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
He's been repressed. So, of course, he's angry. He's mad. He doesn't like his brother. And when he gets the chance to give his brother freedom from his enslavement, I guess you would say,
Mm-hmm.
he says no, he's not good enough because he doesn't want, it's a bit of that insecurity of like, oh, well, I know my brother's a good flyer and I have to struggle to do it and be good at it. He's better than me. So I don't want him to be better than me because I'm actually going somewhere with this.
So he's afraid.
Oh,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. And that's, I guess, one of the other reasons why he's so susceptible to just falling in with the pure ones.
Yes, because they make him feel safe to a point.
Mm-hmm. And they're able to just really use the fear against him.
Mm-hmm.
Next on our characters, I guess in terms of who we meet immediately, we then have Sylphie, who is voiced by Emily Barclay. So she's an elf owl, which I did not know was a thing before watching this movie. I learned so much about owls watching this movie.
I did know about elf owls. I know that they come from the deserts and that.
Oh, okay. So that's legit when they said that they found her in the desert.
Yes, elf owls are actually known to be living in cacti.
Really?
Yes, they find a way of like gnawing a hole into the cactus.
So that they can get around. So
and that's why they're so small.
Oh, cool. See, this is a great movie. Look at all the things that we get to learn out of it. So what do you think about Sylphie as, her character, the navigator?
So Sylphie is young. She's very young, and that's it's very predominant. But I will say that she is very wise and very knowledgeable because she knows about like this whole moon blinking thing that happens to brainwash the other owls. And she knows it. She remembers it and says and realizes what they're trying to do. And she can warn people about it. So she's very smart.
And especially with the fact that she can help navigate because she knows the stars. And she says that too, where she says, don't worry, I can, help us, get to where we need to go because I know the stars.
Yes. So I think she was an excellent character. At first, when they brought her in, I was like, oh no, is she going to be the love interest? But that doesn't really happen, which I really liked because I feel like movies just generally they're always shoving love in your face. Like you have to fall in love. You have to be with the person that's perfect with you. But in reality, I feel like there needs to be more emphasis on the Scott Pilgrim ideology, the power of loving yourself, of self-respect. So I feel like having that not be the case was perfect. And I loved it so much. And it made me just go like, oh, you know what? I can't argue about this movie that much. It's one thing that I thought I was going to be able to argue about this movie. But no, it didn't even happen. So I enjoyed it that much more.
Interesting that you point that out about love interests. So the owls that some of the characters pair off with and mate with in the series, they are not featured in the film. I don't know if that's because they're not featured in the 3 books or if that was just a choice by Zack Snyder together with Catherine Lasky to just go, we have enough characters to make a nice tight story and we can kind of play around a little bit with having that will they, won't they feeling between certain characters, but we don't need to actually do that because they're still kids. We can save that for when they are adults in the sequels.
Yeah.
Kind of like what we have in Redwall with Cornflower and Matthias.
Are you kidding me? Cornflower and Redwall were totally a couple from the beginning.
I said sort of, Myles.
Wasn't even close.
Okay.
They were subtle about it, yes.
But then
they
as
were
it keeps
absolutely
going,
a couple.
yeah.
Because Cornflower gives Matthias the scarf and says, "Here, you will wear my colors and be my knight." That is totally them being a couple. It wasn't like, oh, hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. That is like shoving a pie in your face.
I more reference that in the sense of, I suppose I should have phrased that more in the sense of they could have gone that route. And I feel that they kind of do that with Soren and Ocheliza, one of the owls that he meets when they get to the Guardians. But again, she's not who he pairs up with in the actual story. So they probably just ended up doing that to just still have that part of a story that you're just supposed to have.
You don't have to have it.
You don't have to have it, but it always ends up happening anyways.
No, it doesn't have to, and this just proves it.
Yeah. Anyways, we'll move on with the rest of our characters. So then we'll have Twilight, who's voiced by Anthony LaPaglia, the, I guess you could say, bard of the group.
Yes.
Nice, big, strong owl who also seems to love singing.
The warrior poet.
Yes, the warrior poet.
Or as I like to call him, the Altamir. Because that's my D&D character who's a warrior poet.
What did you think about Twilight?
Well, it's a terrible movie, but the character is great.
I walked right into that one.
Yes, you did.
Yes, I did.
You can't throw these softballs at me, my friend. I'm just going to knock them out of the park.
Yep.
Personally, I do like Twilight a lot. I liked him way more than I thought I would. He's not a good bard, and he's not a bad bard, but he manages to walk that line of being right in between both of them, that it actually makes it very enjoyable.
So what's your definition between a good bard and a bad bard then?
He's not an excellent singer, songwriter, performer.
Right. So he's not necessarily fulfilling the bard qualities.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. He walks that line where he can be good and he can be bad.
Okay.
So it would be like, I'm going to throw some D&D terms out here. Everything that happens in D&D happens on a 20-sided die, right?
Right. Whether
you succeed or fail depends on your roll of that D20. And this is a case where, if you had a character where if you rolled something odd, which would be 1, 3, 5,
right,
you would add a minus 13 to your score.
Oh.
If you rolled a positive, you would add 13 to your score.
Okay, I see.
So he's either black or white. He's good or he's bad, but at the same time, he's doing both.
I see.
And that's what makes it enjoyable to me.
Okay, I see. I wasn't sure if maybe it was that he's a person who had a really, really bad charisma score and just decided that no, they're going to be a bard anyways. They've got a 15 in strength and they have a 7 in charisma. But damn it, they're going to be a bard.
It's like the magician, the greatest cage fighter ever, throwing his spears saying, "Magic missile."
Oh no, you're talking
cutting off people's heads going, "Color spray, fear my arcane might."
That, no, I don't think.
That was the wizard.
Yeah, that was the wizard is what he's called, not the magician.
That's right, the wizard.
But yes, you're right. Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking of too. So that Twilight, and I mean he's a huge big owl.
I think he was a great horn, wasn't he?
I don't think he's a horn, but he is. But he was definitely one of the greater, bigger ones because he doesn't have horns.
Mm.
I don't recall exactly which type of owl he was. I know that they have that information written down somewhere. Perhaps I should have done that. That's a on my bad part for not marking that specifically. Anyways, moving on to our next part of the main group of party members. We have Digger, voiced by David Wenham, who, now this one I do at least remember, he's a burrowing owl.
Yes.
Because he digs, and that is his thing. He's a little odd.
He's very twitchy.
Yes, he is.
He actually reminds me of Noel.
Noel?
From Atlantis.
Yes. Oh, you mean Mole.
Mole, yeah.
Mole. Well, of course, they both dig, right?
Well, that and they're twitchy and they're quirky.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. So what did you think then about Digger?
I liked his character. I thought he was pretty good. You said to me that he kind of feels like a Dale Gribble. Personally, I don't think that.
He seems to have certain characteristics that remind me of Dale, but you're right in that he is not Dale Gribble.
Yeah,
I think it's more
he's
once
kind
he
of a
starts
conspiracy theorist, or he's a bit of a theorist, I guess you could say.
Well, he's a little odd, right? And then there's the other part with the fact that he's a burrowing owl, so he's just like burrowing around and things like that. It's just that as soon as he started burrowing around and just kicking dirt and things like that at people, I was just kind of like, pocket sand.
I guess so. Well, I would say that he is probably my favorite character, and I will say that this owl is going places.
Yeah, whether they be underground or overground.
Absolutely.
Now that we have finished the party, now I guess we'll move more into, the supporting the secondary people, but not really, considering that first we have to get through our antagonists, starting with Naira, voiced by Helen Mirren. She is the queen of the Pure Ones, so her mate is Metalbeak, and she is the one who runs St. Agelia's School for Orphaned Owls, and picks out those that are worthy enough to join the Pure Ones to be soldiers and all of that. What'd you think of her?
Personally, I see her as a very classic feudal lord. But I was also weirded out by the fact that they were using bats. That was kind of a strange thing.
You mean with the fact that they're using the owls to get the flex, like the little magnets and whatnot to put them together? Yeah, so they don't necessarily like what they say is that because bats don't have a gizzard, that means that they're not affected by the magnets. Whereas owls do have a gizzard, and that's what it messes with them. And so then it just, it doesn't seem to kill them. It just screws with their heads and just, makes them all really loopy and they can't really do anything.
And according to the Army of Darkness, they won't be killed by skeletons who have no legs that are crawling around on the ground with a knife in their mouth. Because they'll cut your gizzard out.
Oh, right. What did you think of her in the sense of her, as a villain, or even just her place in the Pure Ones? I mean, I know you say, very much feels like a feudal lord, but what do you mean specifically by that?
Well, she acts like she's the cream of the crop. She's the best of the best. She's at the top and everybody else is at the bottom because that's where their places are. So that gives me that whole sense of this is...
She just understands her place in the pecking order.
Yes.
And
even though there are no
turkeys
there, she knows.
What do you mean there's no turkeys?
Bob's Burgers.
Oh. Well, I was just saying, I was just saying
You're
that
the one who said pecking order.
Yes, because they're owls. It was the correct term to use, damn it.
Sure. You can give that hoot if you want.
Mm-hmm. Then we have her mate of Metalbeak, who is voiced by Joel Egerton. So he's the one who is the leader of the Pure Ones. According to the stories, Lies of Keel tore off his beak, and that's the reason why he wears the helmet that has a metal beak on it, so that you can't see that he doesn't have a real beak anymore.
He definitely gave me Clooney the Scourge vibes.
See, more Redwall.
Yeah, but at the same time, the whole mask with the beak thing definitely reminded me of the fox.
Oh yeah, the fox.
Slager the Slaver.
Yeah, him.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, right, him. Well, especially because that's because of his run-in with the snake, isn't it? And that's why because doesn't he wear a mask or something too? Because he survived the encounter with Asmodeus?
Partially. He was also heavily disfigured from the fact that he had to crawl through all of that boiling oil or boiling water or whatever that was put in the hole.
Right. Because of the fact, right.
Because he had to, or what was it? It was pudding. Boiled pudding. Yeah, it was some sort of food that they poured down the hole. And of course, he wanted to escape with his life. So he crawled through that, burnt himself horribly, disfiguring himself. And then he got attacked by Asmodeus on the other side and somehow managed to get away.
Yes, somehow. So again, just tying into that red wall, huh? All right. So then, with what we got with Metalbeak, what were you thinking about him?
Well, he's your classic Hitler, I guess you could say. He thinks he's the best and his species is the best because he's on top and everybody else is beneath him.
Interesting thing about this is that, so the whole, actually, I suppose this does make even more sense than with kind of Hitler analogies. So the whole thing with the pure ones is that Tytos are all pure ones. Metalbeak himself is not a Tyto owl. He's not a barn owl. He's a sooty owl. So probably same like catch sort of area of the type of owls as barn owls, but he's not a barn owl, which therefore means he's not a Tyto. So he's not a pure one himself.
Yeah, definitely fits that Hitler analogy then. Wasn't Hitler actually Jewish?
No, he wasn't. I don't think so. I can't say that for certain because I can't remember. And some of that might be trying to separate fiction from, like, you know, non-fiction historical accounts and whatnot.
Fair enough. Well, let's carry on then.
Yeah. And then our last antagonist, we could say, is Alamir, who's voiced by Sam Neill. So this is the spy master, in a sense, even though they don't use that term, for the Guardians. And we don't really know that until we start putting the pieces together when Eglinton tells Soren that, no, I wasn't rescued, I was presented to the owl that brought me back. And then, oh God, as Admiral Akbar says, it's a trap. But we do see him interact earlier in the film with Metalbeak, and so we know about it. But at the same time,
it was kept kind of vague.
Yeah.
I feel like I should have made that connection early on when they showed his outline.
Honestly,
but I guess the screen was just a little too small, or it was just a little too dark on the screen, a little too bright where we were to actually make that connection.
No, I'm going to say that was deliberately framed that way so that you couldn't tell. Like, even his voice, I feel that Sam Neill was putting on a slightly different intonation with how he was talking to Metalbeak, and then when we see him at the tree. Because I didn't notice it either. The first time I saw it, I didn't make that connection. And then in repeat viewings, I'm like, what? How did I miss that? That thing that happened for 10, 15 seconds. So I'm going to say it wasn't the TV. I'm going to say that you missed it because he's a good spy.
Fair enough. I can't argue that. Let's carry on to the
all right,
the good guys again.
Yeah, so
good owls.
Yes, the good owls. I guess we'll go with the what we have is Ezelrib, or Lies of Kiel, being his, I guess, actual name, who is voiced by Jeffrey Rush. So he is he's Lies of Kiel. He is the hero of the chronicles and the stories that Soren is obsessed with. And of course, when Soren meets him, he's this sort of like digger. He's this quirky, really weird, and obviously has scars and things like that from past battles and things like that. And probably has some trauma with him to go along with that. It just manifests more in that, oh, Grandpa's kind of a little nuts sometimes and just, shouts random things or whatever, or is just very blunt and in your face, as opposed to say the wrong thing to him, and all of a sudden he's just like snaps and then just starts strangling you or something.
Yeah.
What did you feel about him?
I really like that he survived the war, and he doesn't like the war, but he's still willing to fight.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this is a sort of a character model that a lot of stories didn't do as well as they definitely did in this.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of the standard I'd like to see things put at, because usually when you hear about that soldier that survived the war, he's either completely broken or totally fine and well adjusted. It's not that, like, you know, there's issues with him and he's going to tell people like, hey, look, war is shit. War is hell. You should not do this. But if you're going to do it well.
Yeah.
So he really fits that role extremely well. And I really enjoyed that. And I feel like a lot more people should be doing this kind of role.
As in just having that soldier who they are adjusted enough that they can function in day-to-day society, but you still know that they're messed up.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, working at Wholesale Sports, I've ran into a lot of people like that.
Right.
And like you can see it. You can see it in their mannerisms, the way that they talk and the way that they act, that there is something that still bugs them.
Mm-hmm.
But they are able to push it away enough to be able to interact with society, talk with people, can make connections and still live. But you can still tell that it bugs them. And it's that chip on their shoulder, that thing that they can't get rid of. It's the monkey on the back for them.
Right. And one of the other cool things that I like about that is that we have two characters that are like that. So we're going to jump into the other character who's like that, Grimble, who is voiced by Hugo Weaving. Incidentally, Hugo Weaving voices two owls in this. He also voices Soren and Clud's father. But considering that he's only in for like a couple scenes, it was nice of them to give him something that had a little bit more meat as well, which of course gives us Grimble, who is one of the owls that works at St. Aegelius. So he works for the Pure Ones. And when he separates Soren and Sylphie from the others, part of that is because I'm fairly certain he knew that they were wise to the moon blinking and were very specifically trying to fight back. And so he saw them and was like, yes, these are the ones. These are the ones that will finally help me get revenge on the Pure Ones for what they have done to me and what they have made me do for them, sort of thing. So what did you think of him?
So I find it very interesting that Hugo Weaving did both the father and this character, because it kind of adds that thing of like, as the elf owl says, Sylphie, you know, why should we trust him? He goes, no, I think we should definitely trust him because he sounded like his father.
Right.
So
that's actually not a bad way to look at it too. Yeah,
a very clever thing to do. I mean, understandably that both didn't have huge roles, so putting both of them together in this way worked very well.
And Hugo Weaving again, similar to what Sam Neill was doing as Alamir, where he is, you know, he has a very noble way of presenting himself when he is with the Guardians. And then when he's talking to Metalbeak, he's, you know, a little bit more villain sounding. Like there's a little bit, there is less nobility. And
well, he still changed his voice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Grimble and Soren's father. They don't sound the same, even though it is the same voice that is doing both.
Yeah, but there's still times where you meet people that sound like other people too, so it still works.
Yep.
Like I said, I like this character. I just wish we had a little more time with them to kind of flesh them out a bit. I felt it was just a little short.
Yeah, I think this is one of the issues that you run into when, of course, you're adapting 3 books to put into one film, right? So I'm pretty sure that Grimble is a way larger character in the books because from the way it's presented in the film, when he separates Sylphie and Soren and says that he's going to teach them how to fly whenever they have downtime, that makes it seem like they're going to do it immediately and they learn how to fly in 5 minutes.
It was less than that. It was like 30 seconds.
Well, sure. But, I mean, you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
even though time has obviously passed, because Clud is also being trained how to fly, and Naira even gives him and the other new Taitos a task of showing who is the best flyer. So obviously that did not happen in 5 minutes.
It takes as long as it needs to.
Yes, it does.
Well, let's carry on now to Miss P.
Yes, who is our kind of the last of, I would say, the main characters in the sense. Even though, again, she doesn't really have a huge role. Mrs. P, who's voiced by Miriam Margolis, is the nursemaid in Soren's nest. So she was there to look after Soren and Clud when they were hatchlings. And then when Eglinton was born, she was still there to look after them as well.
I have no idea why they went with a snake. I think it was just to sort of throw a bone into the soup. By all means, sure, you can't eat it, but it gives it some nice flavor. So...
especially with the fact that when she rejoins the story, she is introduced as Dinner by Twilight because he's going to eat her. And then we can't because, no.
People say I can't be poetic.
So outside of the fact that she's a snake, what did you think about her place in the story?
I think it was fine. She did kind of act as the nanny, I guess you'd say, teaching the owls, like, hey, look, this is what happens when you eat. This is what happens afterwards. Like, you can't digest it. You spit this up, and it's normal. It's weird, but it's normal. So,
sort of like me being a snake here, looking after owlets and hatchlings. It's weird, but it's normal.
Yeah, exactly. So, just go along with it. Don't worry. Don't ask too many questions. It's fine.
Right. There are quite a few other characters in here, such as Jet and Jut, the two. Maybe they're brothers, but I'm not necessarily sure. Those are the two guys that snatch up Soren and Clud, and they're the ones that are, trying out different looks and voices to try to intimidate everybody.
They're definitely brothers in arms.
Yes.
Or wings in this case.
Yes, they certainly are. Actually, since we're still here, so what did you think of Jet and Jut? I mean, those guys, so they're trying to come across as being evil, right? Because of how they act towards all the owlets that they're snatching up, right? But then there's always this whole, ooh, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try out my intimidator and things like that. Or I'm going to, try this new scowl and this new voice. What did you think? Do you think it sounded good?
Well, I guess you could refer to that as humanizing the enemy. But, at the same time, they are still technically people, or owls in this case. And, they have their things. They have their quirks. I mean, how many times are there stories recalled about people who crossed the enemy lines and saw, like, two Germans sitting smoking, and one of them starts singing a song and the other one joins in because they recognize it?
Right.
What if those songs actually came from America, too? Like, they are people. It's messy. And you understand that everybody has their own characteristics and their own traits. So I thought it was deserved. And it really adds to it. So
an interesting thing that I feel to point out is that we don't see Jet and Jut fight. So, like, when they come together and they're having the fight at the end, they aren't really referenced afterwards, which makes me wonder if they're very much kept over in, at the school, and then you have a separate area where you take all of the Pure One soldiers and they continue their training there, and they work for the Pure Ones, so they're enabling and everything, but they are not Pure Ones, therefore they don't even use them as feather fodder for some reason, or talon fodder, I believe was the term that Lies used.
Well, they serve their purpose and they do their job, right?
That's true.
What more can you ask from a good, obedient soldier lapdog?
What indeed? Although, okay, so that's a good lead-in for another thing that I really want to talk about for this. So, what are your thoughts on how certain subject matters are approached in this film. I'll just quickly say that one of the things that I like about Snyder's work is that he is not very subtle when it comes to his storytelling. I feel that he puts his thoughts and interpretations of complex ideas and portrays them in as blunt a way as possible. Do you think that that is an appropriate way to tackle more mature subject matters such as indoctrination or subjugation or even fascism?
Well, I mean, it goes in every direction.
Mm-hmm.
Indoctrination is just a technique. It's not necessarily it doesn't lead to fascism. It doesn't lead to communism. It can be either or.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't lead to capitalism.
No, but I mean, by all means, indoctrination can lead to capitalism as well, or any religion.
Yep.
Personally, I think it's a good stepping stone that Snyder used and did this, but I also feel it was kind of a little too black and white in an area that could be gray. But I still think it was good because it introduces the subject.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows the subject, but I would be a little bit cautious about it because you can end up forcing your opinion of the subject on the people without giving them the choice and seeing that there's an option.
Okay.
So in this case, by all means, they're showing that fascism is bad and that this other group's way of doing things is good. The what do you call them?
With the Guardians, right?
Yeah, the Guardians. So I'm not saying that fascism is good, but they're not showing that, they're using basically similar techniques to achieve a similar goal. They castize their system, much like the Tau do in Warhammer 40k.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, but I mean, there's a caste system in the Imperial Guards as well, or in the human system as well. Mm-hmm. And you don't really leave your system because that's the way it is.
Well, I mean, the way they present it with the Guardians is that, so I mean, with the pure ones, if you are not a Taito, you are not a pure one. Therefore, you will not be able to rise above, being a picker. You are going to be moon-blinked. You are going to be turned into a slave. Whereas with the Guardians, they're like, you made it here? Okay, that's great. That proves that you have a very strong personality, which is good, and you won't mind when we tell you, hey, yes, I know you really want to be a fighter, but you are way better at being a scout, so you're going to be a spy. And that's where we're going to train you because that's where your true talents lie. Maybe you really, really, really want to be a fighter, but we're here to tell you, no, don't do that because you can be so much better if you do this thing because you are really good at this thing.
Yeah, but again, like I said, it's... So when it comes to the whole caste system and they get put in their place, again, it doesn't matter about you doing what you're good at. I mean, let's take it for instance, I am good at HVAC, but I hate it. And it comes to a point where eventually I'm going to screw up more and more because I just dislike it so much that it's going to cause problems. Right. So regardless of if you're good at something or not, if you have no interest in it, you can screw it up and that causes its own issues. So their system isn't as right as the other.
Of course. And I mean, in a way, it's not that we don't get certain elements of gray. Like, would you not view Alamir as more of a gray element then? Because he's a guardian, but he's willing to betray them because he has greater aspirations. He wants to be the leader of the Guardians. He wants to be the king.
No, because evil always fights itself. No matter what you do, evil will always fight itself, and that's a trope from D&D that we always see. Because if evil ever stopped fighting itself, then it would win. Then it will no longer be evil, it will be the right way.
Yeah. Which, I mean, is another interesting thing because of, in a way, that is a good way to portray fascism because that is one of the reasons why the Nazis kind of fell apart the way they did is because they just kept fighting because This person felt that he was right. That person felt that they were right. And then they just try to sabotage the other so that they can actually be right.
Yep, and that's the big issue with it.
Well, I mean, is that... So still going back to the desensitizing aspect, though, so you very much do feel that having it being so bleak of they're wrong, we are right, is a detriment to it as well, because you're still basically saying our way is the correct way, don't do it another way.
Well, again, I like the idea that Zack Snyder's portraying of showing you, like, hey, look, there are these two things, and they're both doing the same thing, which is trying to survive, and they do it different ways. And the fact that you the fact that you make one black, the other white, I mean, it's a lot like a lot of video games these days. The Outer Worlds is the first one that comes to mind, where you either have a world that you can join that is an absolute, I would call it a feudalistic enterprise, where it's like a company-owned world and you support the company in everything you do. And then your other view is the hippies that just live in the forest and live in the trees, and there's nothing that really there's no real care about money. And it's so black and white. And that kind of desensitizes everything, and it's not right. DJ Peach Cobbler did an awesome video on this, on why he likes the Stalker series for its factions. It's because they are not black and white. Sure, Duty is full of people who are kind of militaristic, kind of as in very. And they want to destroy the zone. They feel that it is their purpose. But when the zone kicks out these chimeras that are able to wipe out 30, 40 stalkers, not get stopped, and leave, and you get controllers that are able to dominate you and turn you into a zombie to do their bidding, like, you have to destroy the zone. What's your other option? And then you get Freedom, who everybody kind of looks as they're the pot-smoking hippies, because they have names like Snitch, Ganja was another one. And, like, you know, they have some of these, like, really weird names. But in reality, their ideology is, well, the zone is here. There's no way we're going to kill it. We have to find a way of coexisting with it. But at the same time, we still have to protect ourselves from it, because just like in the environments in the real world, we have to carve out what we can live in.
Yeah.
And the zone seems to be somewhat okay with that, as long as we don't take too much.
I find that interesting that people immediately think that that's the hippie thing, because of the fact that they just say, we can't get rid of it. Because I sit there and I go, I don't feel like that's necessarily a hippie thing. That is just a pragmatic way of looking at it. The zone is here. It's been created. You got to deal. You just got to deal.
Yes.
Life changes.
I think they call it a hippie thing because their name is freedom.
Yeah.
And they actually hold the values of freedom over top of all.
Right.
Which does kind of lead them to align with be okay with bandits in that.
Because it just happens.
It's part of the society, you know?
Yeah. Well, since we're kind of on this topic then, and, you know, again, with the whole black and white and desensitization, so do you think that these subjects that we're looking at, indoctrination, subjugation, or even just fascism, they should be explored more in stories like what we have here that are aimed towards younger audiences?
Well, yeah, I think it's especially important that we have more things like this the farther we get from World War II. I mean, take a look right now. We get Americans that don't realize that there was a whole war fought against the idea of Americanism and fascism are two separate things. And they seem to struggle with this ideology that there was a war fought about it, and I don't know, I think the values are the same. Or
the fact that they seem to think that Antifa are actual fascists, despite the fact that Antifa is anti-fascism.
Yeah. But I guess that's indoctrination for you. I mean, take a look at everybody saying, oh, communism is going to destroy the economy.
And yet here we are where the economy is only going forward because of the fact that it cannot fall. It cannot fail, right?
No, not at all. The economy is going as it is, and it will keep failing because the economy has to crash. It's going to crash again. It crashed twice in our lifetimes, 3 if you count, COVID.
Right.
4, if you want to count the fact that if you were 10 years older.
Right.
So
yes.
at the end of the day, they keep saying, oh, the economy will fail because communism will bring it down. When in reality, communism means there will not be an economy.
Right, because of the fact that everyone will be together and everything will be getting done and no one will be above the other.
Exactly. So it's sort of that irony of, that we kind of recognize that our parents were told one thing, shown one thing, and how far that could be from the truth.
So in that way then, so would you say then that this is very much trying to have as complex of a story as it can, but still something that is relatable to all ages?
Yes. And it walks a very thin, hard line to do so.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it did it very well.
Nice.
By all means, I could say, it could have been more complex, but that's just because I'm older. When we're talking about an age group of, let's say...
8 to 12?
Yeah, 8 to 12. I think that this is perfect. It asks questions, it presents values, it shows differing points of views on a similar playing field.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, it does choose one over the other, which we'll talk about that later. But, I don't think it did anything wrong.
So on that note, this is something that stuck out to me as something that I really liked. And we talked about this when we were talking about the characters. What are your thoughts on how the reality of war is presented through the characters of Grimble and Ezelrib, or, Lies of Keel?
So, war, especially when we were growing up, got re-glorified, even though in the Vietnam War it did not get re-glorified. It got horrified, I guess you could say.
Right.
And I guess it's another cycle. Good old conservationism. It's a cycle that's going to happen. And we are kind of seeing more of that. War is ugly, and we need to kind of keep our eyes and try not to do it. And this is the perfect example of why. These people have seen war. They know it's horrible. They know that they may have to do it again, or that they have to stand up and keep things peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
But the characters are so well done for it. I feel like they're perfect, especially those two, because they don't want to fight. They want to have peace. But then when they're showing, look, this peace is no longer an option. It's going to be completely dominated by somebody else, and we just let them roll over us, and things will change, or else we do this, we fight, we get it over with, and hopefully we can get back to the life we had before. And like I said, I think they did an awesome job of it. And even who is the mentor there?
Well, it's Lies, right? Lies of Keel, because he's the one who Soren notices his stamp for. He's the one who's writing the chronicles, and then he's like, now wait a minute, so you wrote the chronicle for that one battle that I'm always, going on and on about, where Lies of Keel fought Metalbeak.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right. That's me. And it's like, well, you're not who I expected. And then he's like, oh, what were you expecting? You were expecting I was going to be a hero and I was going to be glorious? Well, that's not what war is.
Exactly. And I like that they show that, and they're showing people the aftermath of what a war could be. Mm-hmm. And that's why I say that as we get farther from World War II, we need to have more of this in the media. Yes. It needs to be thrown out there more that, hey, look, war is not glorious. War is not something that people should look up to. That's one thing that I loved about 1917. Mm-hmm. These soldiers are just doing their jobs, and it's ugly. It's super ugly. It's gross. It's dirty.
Well, again, the thing that always really gets me, if I was to say that I had a favorite character, my favorite character actually is Grimble, because he is that person who, he represents kind of the idea of the road to hell is paved with good intentions. because he fought against the Pure Ones when they came to his kingdom, and he continued to fight, and then they saw how strong his will was, and then they said, okay, we're going to hold your family hostage, and you have to do our bidding, and we will not kill them. And so then by the time he meets with Soren and Sylphie and is telling them his story, and he's like, I've done horrible things, and I hate myself because I allowed it to happen, because all of the promise that they're keeping my family alive, and honestly, his family probably got killed
immediately.
Yes. And they, maybe just kept up the pretense or whatever. I get the feeling at a certain point, even though he says to them, I'm going to go and try to free my family, I feel like he was probably saying that for their benefit of not admitting to children that, yes, this is how brutal and horrible the Pure Ones are. My family's been dead for years.
Yeah.
Because I can't really think of any other animated films that have a character like that, or at least ones that are all ages. The only ones that I can immediately think of would be something like Watership Down. And Watership Down is very much in its own category.
I'd say Redwall is kind of a similar thing, isn't it?
Actually, that's a good point.
But again, Redwall is kind of its own thing too, because Redwall is a Canadian author, and he did
Brian Jock is a British author.
British? I thought he was Canadian.
Nope.
I thought he was British Canadian.
Well, maybe he did come to Canada, and that's why Redwall was done through Canadian groups and everything, as in the animated series. But he is from Britain.
Okay.
But still, like, if you think of something like Wolfwalkers or Secret of the Kells, or even just like Disney films and any that are trying to be like Disney films, they're not going to have a character like that. Or if they do, he's not going to be focused on the way Grimble was, or even the way Liza Keel is focused on.
It's very true. But then again, they don't want to portray that ugliness. They want to keep it more pure.
Yeah. Although, actually, that's something else that, with making that comparison, something else that is very different, and again, is like kind of a signifier of a Zack Snyder work. Soren kills Metalbeak. He does not try to not kill him.
And that makes sense, because he's a terrible person. He's done all sorts of atrocities, and like, what's he going to do? Try to redeem him?
But that's the thing, Myles. That's usually what happens in these sorts of things. If you think about TV shows, if you think about other films that are for kids, they don't kill the bad guy. They find some way to redeem them. They throw them in prison or whatever, and they try to hug it out.
Not totally true.
Well, what are some counterexamples?
I think you're confusing protagonists with paragons.
Okay.
So by all means, Aang is a person who is a paragon. He wants people to follow him and work things out. Same with Captain America, also a paragon that wants to heal things and make it work out. Wolverine, not a paragon, does not want to heal and make things work out.
Okay, yes, you're right.
Batman tries to be a paragon. Doesn't really work that well, though. And that's kind of why the stories keep going.
Well, I think that also depends on which type of Batman we're following here. Again, another Zack Snyder thing. Considering that the whole point of his arc with Batman is that Batman has fallen from grace. That's why he brands people. That's why he uses guns. That's why he kills people, because he's lost all hope. And then his hope is reaffirmed after he almost kills Superman and finds out that he's become everything that he sought to combat in the first place. And then from that point on, he has to try to redeem himself because he has been shown that he's wrong.
Now, Superman also kills.
Yes, he does.
And he may not necessarily kill all the time, but he gets rid of the threats.
Yes.
And the problems. I would argue the same with Flash as well.
Mm-hmm.
Hawkeye.
So, I mean, we have Captain America, and it's interesting that
you would say that... What about the Guardians of the Galaxy?
Well, okay, so it's
I'm
interesting.
sorry, Cameron, but you're
I
like...
know. No. Like, you keep going with superheroes in comic books, right? But when I think about something like She-Ra, for example, the new... Have you seen She-Ra?
Yes.
Okay.
And she's a paragon.
Yeah. Catra
she's not a protagonist,
does...
she's a paragon, which is a type of protagonist.
So, like, because Catra does horrible things that, in my opinion, are kind of irredeemable, but the end of the series has her, joining up with everyone, and everyone's just cool with the fact that lots of people are dead because of things she did.
Yes.
And I just sit back and I'm like, no, I don't get it. I don't understand why we have to be accepting of this. Is there something wrong with saying this person did horrible things that we are not going to gloss over?
Yes, but you also got to remember that that whole story trope, or not the trope, but the whole story revolves around the fact that those two are actually basically in love.
Okay, yes, that's...
So She-Ra wants her to be redeemed so she can have something with her.
Yeah, I mean... I feel like that sets kind of a bad precedent too, though, Myles.
Oh, I totally agree. That's why we haven't done that show.
Well, I mean, we also can't because we've both seen it.
Yeah.
So we both know what's going on. I feel like maybe we're getting a little bit stuck in the whole paragon versus protagonist thing. My point that I was trying to make, especially when it comes to animation, is that generally speaking, your heroes do not kill the bad guys, which of course is also what I feel puts it in similar place as Redwall, because Matthias kills a lot.
Matthias and Madameo. Well, actually not Madameo, but...
and Martin. Like, their whole point is that they are warriors, and they do have to kill, if it comes down to it. He kills Asmodeus, and he kills Clooney as well.
But if we take a look at a meta perspective of the whole thing, the reason why they're not killing is because they don't want to come up with more characters. Because whenever you kill a character, you have to make a new one, or else the story ends.
Are you sure it's not also just the fact that they don't want to have something that kids are going to watch, and they see that, yes, it's okay, you can kill the bad guy? Which, now that I say that out loud, seems kind of weird, considering that video games have a lot of violence where you kill a lot of people. Sometimes they just make it seem like you're not killing them, but, oh, you are.
Like Batman when he grabs people and flips them upside down.
Oh, yeah, and just leaves them there for who knows how long, or snaps their legs and then just leaves them out in the cold.
Hits them with his vehicle.
Yeah.
At like 80 kilometers an hour. Oh, they're just incapacitated.
Don't worry, it's, rubber tires, right? Rubber bumper.
Rubber bumper.
So that was more the point that I was getting at, in that I don't feel that we have enough like this, because especially with the way politics seems to be going these days, you have a lot of people, a lot more left-leaning people that say we have to stick with decorum. We can't just kill people or whatever for no reason. We have to show tolerance towards them. But then you have the problem of they're not tolerant towards you. So what is the actual justification for keeping them around? That's sort of what I mean. Soren kills Metalbeak because he knows he has to.
Well, when you think about it, those characters are truly evil. Because one of the clauses to be evil is to keep the other people who are quote-unquote good around and to show them that your way works.
I see.
So it's just showing that evil actually works.
Fair enough. Going on a bit of a different track, but still kind of important. So this film came out in 2010, and due to the nature of it being an animated film, that actually meant that it started production back in like 2006, 2007, which was around the same time that Zack Snyder finished 300. Now, these days, Zack Snyder has a bit of a reputation, if you believe social media, of being pro-fascist, due to how dedicated he was to replicating Frank Miller's style from his comic book, down to the story beats and the pathos. But then considering that he immediately went from making that film to making this, which I feel is like the complete antithesis to the Spartan ideology. What are your thoughts on that when you hear me say people think Snyder is pro-fascist because he made 300?
So 300 was a film about the propaganda that was being portrayed from Spartans to other Spartans.
And also other Greeks as well.
Yes. So, of course, it's going to be a pro-fascist film, because why would you show people, hey, look, we're the best and we're the badasses, but we lose? So, saying that, if we actually watched the movie, you realize that the Spartans are actually defeated by somebody who was born and not considered to be good enough to be a Spartan because he had physical deformities.
Right.
Now, if people think 300 is a pro-fascist film, they clearly are not watching the movie, because the only reason why the Spartans lost is because they actually got beat by somebody who gave up one of their giant weaknesses. So, and it was somebody that they didn't accept.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, people who don't watch the movie 300 would of course go for seeing from the commercials, and that would be like, oh, this is definitely a pro-fascist film. It's pro-masculinity and all that stuff. It's everything that we're against, because they've never seen it.
Well, at the same time, this is one of the things, and this is why I say more people need to watch this movie, because of the fact that this is the only animated thing that Snyder has done to this point. He has talked about there are some things that he wants to do in the future that will also be animated, but at the time of this recording, this is the only animated film that has been completed, that he has been in charge of. But people look at his body of work, and they see 300, and then they see Watchmen, and then they see Sucker Punch, which has its own can of worms that we cannot go into because that will take way too long. And then they look at Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and Justice League, and they just say, look at all of the fascist things and objectivist things that Snyder keeps doing. Look at Superman, for example. He's a fascist and he's an objectivist. Look at how, self-serving he was in the battle of Metropolis. He all these people die because of his actions, or, in Superman or in Batman v Superman, he doesn't smile enough. He seems to hate having to save people. What's wrong with him?
Yes, he was so selfish in fighting the guy who wanted to terraform the earth and recreate it into his own home world. That is absolutely what somebody who is both fascist and objectist would do. Fight somebody who's trying to instill his own literal world over top of your own. Sure. Sounds totally fascist to me. Sure. He's unhappy because people keep coming up and trying to do these things, and he has to keep beating them down because it's not right. I would be unhappy too if I went to somebody's house and was like, hey, look, your furnace isn't working because your filter is dirty. Look, it says on the filter, last time it was replaced was February of 2015. It is now 2022. Of course your furnace isn't going to work. And I pull it out and I slip in a new one and I write the date on. And then in another 7 years, I come back because they're having issues. And I go, oh, look, this filter is it's dirty. It was replaced in 2022. It is now 2029. Why haven't you learned your thing? There's a reason why nowadays, if I go over to somebody's house, I tell them straight up, check your furnace filter. If it's dirty, I'm charging you $200. Because I'm sick and tired of telling people, change your filters, and they're not doing it. They want me to come do it for them. That's not my job. You're going to have to pay for that.
Well, if they want to keep paying the $200, then, you just let them?
Exactly. At least I'd make a pretty penny from it, then.
I don't know.
If you're going to waste my time, I at least want money for it.
I just wanted to talk about that because, again, part of this thing is that no one talks about this movie, which is really frustrating because then you have people that immediately start talking about 300 and about how it's pro-fascist and things like that. And then you have people that have seen this movie and they go, well, okay, did you know that he made a movie that is literally what you're talking about, how we need to show how the fascists are wrong? You can just go and watch this other movie that he made. It's got owls in it. It's great.
I don't know. I think the people who think 300 is a pro-fascist movie are the same people who think men can't be raped. So
that is honestly, I don't like bringing things up like that because the thing that I also hate about those sorts of conversations with those people is that they don't want to have a discussion. They tell you you're wrong, they're right, and that's it. There is no further discussion. Then they might go off and cry in the DMs or whatever with other people and go to their own echo chambers and be like, this person's mean to me. They told me I was wrong.
I mean, it's the same thing with the people on the other side, too.
Yes.
Like these QAnons and that.
I mean,
so.
well, okay. I'm not saying you're wrong about that, but that is definitely not the first place that I would have gone. I was going to say, in a way, our podcast is its own echo chamber.
It's true, but if people are willing to come up and talk to us about this, we can absolutely talk about it.
Well, sure. If you think that we're wrong, then we're not going to tell you that you can't tell us that. We're not just going to block away anyone who says that we're wrong. We're not going to be like that. We might disagree with what you disagree with as well, and that's fine. But as long as you're not going to be a jerk about it, then we'll just let you say what you want to say.
Of course.
Because if you shut down conversation, then you're not going to make any progress.
Exactly. And a lot of people forget that.
Although, speaking of a conversation, so we haven't talked about... I keep saying it's an animated film, right?
Yes.
We need to, I guess, talk about the fact that it's an animated film. So Animal Logic was the animation studio that was behind this. I'm not at all familiar with their work.
They made Happy Feet. And Charlotte's Web and 300.
Okay, all right.
So 28 weeks later, like they've done a lot of work.
So they did. Okay,
the
all right.
Matrix movies, Christ.
They worked on the Oh, actually, wait.
Yeah, they're a special effects
that makes
company,
sense because they're an Australian company.
Yes.
Okay, that makes a whole lot of.
Farscape, okay. Thin Red Line, Babe,
nice.
Face Off, hell yeah, Face Off. That was a great movie.
Okay, so I mean, when it comes to special effects, right, maybe I'm not as familiar when it comes to stuff like Babe, Thin Red Line, Face Off, and that sort of thing. Happy Feet. I don't know why that didn't just pop out to me. Of course they did Happy Feet, an Australian film, because that's another George Miller film. Okay, so, I'll eat humble pie a little bit, and for whatever reason of just overlooking all of the amazing things that Animal Logic has done and probably continues to do, because they do amazing work.
Yes, they do. I will say that I did love the animation of this, and it works extremely well with Schneider's... I'm going to keep calling it a slow-mo effect.
Are you also going to continue to say Schneider instead of Snyder?
Yes, Schneider. Why? Because my nose is a little plugged and it's kind of hard not to.
Okay, all right.
It's not that I want to purposefully butcher your name. It's just that
it's happening.
It's happening. I don't mean to. And I've now accepted the fact that I'm doing it, but I don't want to.
All right.
But yes, it really works very well with his slow down, speed up technique that he portrays in his not only fight sequences, but when they're just flying through when they're flying through the storm. Right.
Yes. When he sends him through the twister or whatever.
He calls it a twister. I think it's just like an air pocket or something like that. Sort of like the turtles in Finding Nemo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's
But yeah, I think it was perfect for that, and I want to see Zach do more work like this, more animation, because I think that his technique is unbelievably perfect for this, and I want to see more of that.
Now, you're not an anime person, but would you watch a anime-style series done by Zack Snyder?
Well, I did like Avatar. Both of them.
Right.
And there are other things that use maybe a similar art style that I'm okay with. The thing that I don't like about Japanese anime, I guess I should say, is the culture is just like a little too different for me, and I just don't like the tropes that they portray all the time.
Fair enough.
That's the thing I don't really like about it.
Well, I don't know why. Oh, I know why I took us into this tangent. I mean, so would you watch an anime style series by Zack Snyder that is about the Norse pantheon? So Odin, Loki, Thor, and them, called Twilight of the Gods.
I think I'd check it out. I'd like to see what they're going to do with it. I do like watching shows that involve the North Pantheon. The Norse Pantheon, I should say. Again, my nose is a little plugged up there.
Well, I mean, because
I'd like to see what they do with Aduna, because a lot of people don't do Aduna any good. They just sort of be like, oh, here's a god. And then they move on, because unfortunately with the North Pantheon, it was all basically done by word of mouth, and Aduna kind of was left out, except for the fact that she gets abducted, and she is the wife of Bragi. Adune's husband Bragi, like she's only defined as the wife of him. Even though she's definitely plays a big role, and there was a lot of shrines in that to her. I mean, she was a harvest goddess, to say the least. She was the one who made the golden apples that kept the Norse to be gods. So I would like to see and find out what they do with that, or if it's just going to be the same, 12 stories that get told by the North Pantheon?
Well, I suppose we'll see. I mean, again, this is something that, is something that I like about Snyder, is that he tends to not do what everyone expects you to do, because he has his own ideas, and so he goes in and he wants to do them. When he talks about how he wants to do an Arthurian film, he wants to get it right. I mean, what exactly does that mean, considering how many different interpretations there are of the Arthurian mythos, even from century to century?
Yeah, it could mean tons of things. Like, everybody thinks that Excalibur is a longsword, when in reality it's probably not. It's actually probably a Roman sword.
And Excalibur is not the sword from the stone. Excalibur is what is given to him by the Lady of the Lake.
Exactly.
And the sword that he draws from the stone is a different sword, which breaks, which is why he gets the sword from the Lady of the Lake. Again, as much as it is, for me, as much fun as I enjoy talking about Snyder's films and stuff like that,
I'd like to watch that. But, again, that's going to be a whole subject for another video.
Right. I mean, all you really have to say at this point is that you liked it, the fact that he did something animated.
Yes, and I would like to see more.
Well, speaking of animated things, since this is a good place to wrap this up, I think I remember you telling me a while ago that you have not watched a lot of Disney movies. You've seen some, I know, because you've dropped hints, but I don't think you've seen a lot of the typical Disney films, like the princess films, have you?
No, not really. I've been meaning to watch all of the Disney films from the start to the finish. From Snow White all the way to now.
Well, I feel like I know you've seen some, because I know that you have seen some of the Pixar ones, and I know you've seen ones released within the last 10 years. But
Enchantra was amazing.
Encanto, you mean?
Encanto, yeah. Encanto was amazing.
Well, we are going to launch on a fun little project where we're going to bring in a guest, where since February is the month of love for some people, and I guess for certain marketing purposes. So with that in mind, we're going to have you watch a bunch of princess movies, Myles. So we've got 4 weeks, 4 Thursdays. We're going to have 4 princess movies for you.
Son of a bitch.
Oh, I know you're going to enjoy it more than you think.
Maybe. We'll see.
Indeed, we shall. So that is what everyone here has to look forward to for the next month after this. So Inconceivable Media will be going on sort of a hiatus for the month of February. And then when we come back in March, we're going to continue on with what we have to continue a discussion on Undone.
Yes.
So come back and join us next time when we start watching Disney princess movies. Until then, I'm Cam.
And I'm Myles.
And we'll see you next time.